Second one, early start sort of. Got to do a road trip. Got to get the little girl to the ferries today. Let's go see her friends. School's done. So I'm going to bring my trailer and I'm going to pick up, I don't know, a couple hundred fence posts because I need something to do. And keep carrying on. I only got a few days here before I got to go and start guiding. So I'm going to have my second coffee and do this morning while I wait for the women to get their shit together. Pummeled with emails. Why didn't you take your own advice and go to where the bear was and stand there for a photo? In yesterday's video, I guess. Because where I am fishing is about a 7 mile run on the west coast of the island, a rocky shore, and there's no roads or trails or anything to that beach. The only way to get to that beach where the bear was would be boat access only. So I'd have to drag the Zodiac there behind the big boat. Then I would have to find a semi-sheltered bay to anchor the big boat. Then I'd have to get into shore with the Zodiac, and then I'd have to leave somebody on the boat to videotape. That's why I didn't go to where the bear was by the tree. Very difficult. If it was something significant, like an obvious something standing there looking at you on two legs, would probably have 50,000 people interested in doing that. But imagine getting some of my guide buddies who are on the coast who don't give a flippin' shit about this topic to go out of their way to do all that right now with me. They'd be like, why? Well, I just want to show everybody how big the bear was at the bottom of the tree. They'd look at me like I was a psychopath and tell me to ram it up my ass, right? But I assure you, if I ever catch something on video that's standing there looking at us, we'll be doing the right thing. Not that that's my major goal in life. What else? Another quick note. I want you guys to picture this one. Picture this. Picture if I went online, picked out a random YouTube channel, any page, and then I decided to listen to the channel, and if I heard somebody on that channel say that they thought Sasquatch topic was a joke, it's a farce, it's a fraud, it's insanity, and then I blow a gasket and I non-stop stalk the person that hosts that channel and email them insults and go in the comment section below every one of their videos and just try to rip them to shreds and insult them and demean them and their viewers every chance I got. That'd be a little bit of a kooky thing to do, right? Well, unfortunately, you would not believe how many. We do have a solid handful of flat earthers who, if you do not accept their views, you are the absolute sole enemy of them. Isn't it amazing? Isn't it amazing? It's getting a little old, but that comes my way very often. I think I mention that to you guys every once in a while, but it happens all the time. There's a few handful of kooks out there who are screaming the earth's flat, which I do not give a shit if it's a triangle. It's still working for me. It's working for me. The shape of wherever it is we're living is working for me. It's working for the sun, the snow, the rain, the rivers, the fish, and the game. It's working. I don't care if I just don't care. I don't care. But it's amazing how many of the people who get caught up in that get vicious and nasty and almost psycho when it comes to someone who just won't entertain their thought patterns nonstop or else. It's really bizarre. It's really bizarre. That's all I got for rants this morning. I've only got 1.5 coffees in me, so maybe I'll pick it up by the end of this video and annoy the shit out of somebody. Now, what do we got? More. I'm really trying to figure out why as you can see, I don't know if you can see this, probably not. My list in my phone is of all the emails. I got all the emails unread, titled in notes. And then I mark them as read, as you see, as I do this. And then at the end of the day, whenever I'll go over my notes and I'll have a stack of read emails in this column. I'll mark them all and move them to the red folder. They're out of here. I don't know why. And I keep scrolling all the way down to the bottom of the list, and I start hammering them out. Boom, there's another one that's already been read. I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then I did an experiment. I saw the number. There was 870 something unread emails. I minus the 6 read emails yesterday. I looked at the number and it subtracted them. So it is doing it. I don't know how it is. I'm guessing maybe possibly because people keep emailing me the same email numerous times over, possibly, and I'm always going. I see, oh, I look at my inbox, there's a new one, copy, paste. There's a new one, copy, paste, copy, paste. Nope, that's not a new one. And that's what I'm doing. So it's a little frustrating. And then people, I don't know why, people freak out. You already read that one. They'll go out of my way to email me to tell me that you already read that first email yesterday. Okay, thank you. You know what I mean? And I'm trying to not read them twice, but for some strange reason, it happens. And it frustrates me, but believe me, emailing me to tell me there's far better things to do with your time. For real. Let's get another little gulp of coffee in me, see if I can keep this babble session to go even longer. All right, here we go. My eyewitness report for November 2021. Hey, I've had a couple places ignore my report. I was chatting on Facebook about my encounter and blank, some dude caught wind and started asking about it. I also tried to submit it to the blank RO. I'm yet to hear back from them or see it on the site. And I shared the story with another dude who had it on his podcast. Let me just say, the night this happened, I would have laughed at you if you said you believed in Bigfoot, and even if you had an encounter. Well, now, not laughing. On November 28th at about 2 a.m., I always have one of my windows cracked and prefer the cooler air rather than the heat while I sleep, and I live in New Hampshire. It was like 10 degrees out. The day before, we had a light dusting of snow for maybe an hour. So, I was woken up out of a silent good sleep by what sounded like a person walking down a snowmobile trail we have adjacent to our property line. I looked outside, which was pitch black, no light from my home nor where the noise was coming from. Right away, my senses registered people walking in the dark, possibly for no good reason. The thing that got me was there were no lights, and it sounded like a bipedal man walking. As it got closer, I grabbed a powerful but small hiking/camping flashlight I have handy because I was going to shed light on this walker or creature or whatever the hell. Now there's an empty plot of land right adjacent to the snowmobile trail that splits my land down that plot. They're approximately 2 acres of mostly timber, which here in central New Hampshire, where I've lived most of my life, we have all tall, strong pine, maple, ash, spruce, oak, cedar, lots of beautiful hardwood, and evergreens. I would say the majority is pine. Another notable characteristic about that land across from me is that an elderly man somewhere in Maine owned it for many years until recently. I looked into it and he gave it to an environmental state organization. I thought that was quite interesting. No one ever went into those woods, really. And for the better part of 38 years, my age, it's been quiet there. Now, I am an avid hiker and camper. I have Native American Indian roots from here and love plants and what Mother Nature has. I also studied horticulture, maple syrup making, and a best friend of mine was mostly Native Indian from here, and she passed in 17. Her father was adamant about teaching children about the forest and fish and game. He was a warden, and many people held him in high regard and turned to him and relied on him and his daughter, my friend Linda, who would actually go to work with him often. So, needless to say, I'm fairly mindful of my surroundings and have a strong love for nature and wildlife. Okay, got all that out. Now, as the sound of a man got closer, it sounded like there were more than one walking, and there was. When I thought it was close enough, from my second floor window, I was on my knees intently wondering what the hell this could be. I clicked my light on and I hit the back of a large gray head. This had to be 10 feet tall because he was behind a rock wall that's basically 3 feet tall, and his knee was above it. He stopped walking for a second, noticed where the light was coming from. He turned around totally to look at me, maybe for 3 to 5 full seconds, and his eyes met me. They were real. Okay, there's some missing punctuation, all right, guys? They were light greenish. Okay, hold on. He turned around totally to look at me, maybe for 3 to 5 full seconds, and his eyes met me. They were light greenish, yellow, and bright, and very big, glowing, silver dollar sized. I estimate. Then I caught a glimpse of the other 2 smaller ones walking a few feet away. I assume juveniles, and they seemed to scatter. Almost sounded like they started to run. I was silent. They were also somewhat quieter than They were also somewhat quiet, other than their crunching of footsteps on the icy, hard, very thin layer of fresh snowfall. I saw a large, almost light gray figure standing still. I know it would change my... Oh my God, sorry guys. Standing still, and I know it would change my life because I didn't know Bigfoot existed. Well, he was definitely a Bigfoot, and the others were as well. He turned back in the direction they were heading, and I listened as they crunched through the woods as long as I could. I was in shock. I sprang back from my window, and my mind was spinning like the wheels in a hamster cage. I was trying to make sense of the event. They seemed very docile. The light didn't seem to faze the big guy, but maybe the other 2 sped up away from me as a safety precaution, and he stood guard for a moment until he realized I was just curious and would mean no harm. They seemed to be traveling through the parcel of land that I earlier described. After a full day, I went to the spot to see if there were prints, and unfortunately, we had more snow, so they may have been covered. I found nothing. I didn't want to enter the land, but I would eventually walk the perimeter with a friend a month later. There are countless tree structures in there, and unknown to me until recently, even large boulders that pepper the land. It's hilly. There are many saplings, but there's tons of deadfall and tons of ancient, very, very tall pines and oak. In my opinion, it's perfect for these Bigfoot families to live in there. There's large ponds nearby. There's also access to one of the largest snowmobile trails in North America. There's edibles. There's fiddleheads. I'm sure there's a few large dead trees that were placed in a teepee formation, and by happenstance, I don't think naturally occurring. I felt totally safe. There's no smells, no feelings of distress or anything like that. I've not gotten any real communication except about 15 to 20 minutes after they appeared. There's a very odd and distinct sounds. It sounded like a group of something making very loud screaming sounds from a distance. I have a recording of this. I cannot explain these sounds, and even turned to local group to see if anyone could identify it, and it's unlike anything around here. Even crazy foxes and screech owls. Some of the sounds are like a woman screaming, but with a deep growl, not quite feminine. It sounded like satisfaction of a feast of some sort, or maybe even a killing or group killing. That's what I would say, but there's nothing that really says that's what it is. It's a video I took, and the audio is in the far distance, so you need to turn it up all the way, and possibly even place your ear on whatever source speaker you have. Ever since that night, I have seen multiple things and shapeshifters in that land. There's been lots of activity since November 28th up until the end of April. It seemed to gain more and more activity, and then all of a sudden things have gotten quiet. I have some very interesting photos and videos. I think there may even be a UFO in one of them. I thought I was going nuts. Even my own mother thinks I was. However, she heard the sounds and can't figure it out. Based on my experience, I feel as though it's been for a positive outcome. There was a day that question was proved to me. So my fear is gone, but my interest is piqued. I have lots of questions that are unexplainable. I've done research and heard some similar stories that jive with details from mine. Very interesting. I agree with they are their own people and generally mean no harm unless they feel threatened. I think they are a lot like us. Thanks for putting yourself out there and sending a message to the folks. Keep on keeping on, and thank you, Ryan, Concord, New Hampshire. Ryan, welcome to the Club of No Return. There's no escape. There is no escape now. you're stuck. It's funny though, I was thinking about the other day, daydreaming the other day about how people react so differently to everything. Some people see it, don't want to acknowledge it, pretend it didn't happen, never talk to the person that was with them ever again their entire life. Then other people freak the F out, start a Facebook page or group, get t-shirts and hats and stickers and coffee mugs and go ape shit and dedicate their entire life to being a Bigfoot researcher. Teach your own, whatever floats your boat, but it sure is crazy how the variety of reactions, isn't it, to people who see these things. But anyways, man, be safe out in that plot of land. I am 100% convinced these beings aren't here full time in specific areas. I don't know how they travel about. Do I think they need to walk to travel? Nope. No, I don't. Why? Because the tracks vanish. That's why. The tracks vanish. What does that tell you? That tells me that something else is going on that the majority of people do not want to accept, face, or talk about or acknowledge. But it's in our faces. You can't skip over it. The tracks vanish. Explain that one, right? So whenever when I hear people, I'm not talking about the sea male either. I'm talking about in general, when people talk about how they migrate, they make nests, they need a food source, there's lots of cover, they can live in that patch of forest. Nope, that doesn't jive with me, what I've been observing. It just doesn't jive. Something whose tracks can vanish are not that simple and don't need those simple items like we think we need or other animal species need to survive. They got it going on. They got a lot going on that we don't, and we can't wrap our frickin' melons around, right? The tracks vanish. That makes them a lot more sophisticated than simply needing a pond, some fish, and some game and some cover. Oh, and a nest. Thanks again, man. Getting back to you. Thank you again for sending that email. And if you got some knowledge that's going to help the people, send it to me, right? We really need to help the people, okay? That's what I'm about. Help the people. Or if anybody else out there needs to get it out, get it off their chest, you get it into me. This was titled Voice in My Head Said, You Didn't See Me. Dear Steve, thanks for all you do. Okay to use my name. Last summer, 2021, I began making a list of our savvy-related occurrences on the farm and nearby. That document is now 5.5 typewritten pages with photos of the most recent tree structures. Only a few related incidents are included below. In February 2022, driving home from Quincy, about 4 p.m. on Illinois' Route 96 between Mill Creek and Burton Creek, as I drove up the hill, something sabot-sized and white in the woods on my left drew my attention. I later debunked it as a storage shed plastered with snow, but as I looked, I heard what sounded like my own voice in my head silently say, very matter of fact, "You didn't see me." I was surprised because I did not think those words. Also, I immediately realized they didn't refer to the current moment, but to the last mowing of my hiking trail in September 2021. You mow a hiking trail? That's different. When I witnessed the last few inches of the fall of a mature snapping turtle onto the middle of the hiking path, I saw it snap upwards at whatever dropped it. I was in full sun. The turtle was in mottled shade, 100 feet ahead where the trail meets the woods. Let me read that one more time. In September 21, when I witnessed the last few inches of the fall of a mature snapping turtle onto the middle of the hiking path, that's crazy. The turtle was in mottled shade, 100 feet ahead where the trail meets the woods. Moments later, I was carefully edging around the 20-pound turtle on my riding mower and thinking, I should be looking uphill right now, but I didn't. It was dead center in the 10-foot wide trail. The mower has a 5-foot cut. After a few more moments, I managed to look but saw nothing. This is on the same trail just 200 yards from where I was presented with the hind quarter of a fawn deer while mowing at the end of May or very early June in 2021. My thanks to Club of No Return member Jason, if you remember correctly, whose email to you in July 2021 made me realize that what the hind quarter actually was. Hearing Jason's email was my oh my god moment. Within 50 yards of where the hind quarter was left is the place on the same mowed trail where, in December 2021, another family member felt they were being watched, and they stopped and took several photos of the spot, uphill across a harvested cornfield, where the feeling seemed to emanate from. And that place is just up the hill, 40 yards from where the turtle dropped. Also, it is the location of a geological anomaly on the farm, a round, shallow ditch in the shoulder of a knoll that is probably hiding a sinkhole. Back to Route 96, the "you didn't see me" mind speak occurred less than a mile from the location of what was possibly my first Sabia encounter. I was camping with a fellow Cub Scout on the bluffs near Ghost Hollow. I wonder how it got that name. It is now Sacagawea Girl Scout Camp. This is about 1958 or 59. We heard footsteps in the woods outside the tent and presumed it was my friend's dad, but I never heard anyone leave. Never spoke, and it didn't have a flashlight. Shortly after that, I was overcome with dread and made us go back to my friend's house to sleep. His house was across the gravel road a quarter mile away. The funny thing is, at age 8, I was not all embarrassed about having chickened out. In March 2022, my next door neighbors showed me a pair of tree breaks on our property line, side-by-side saplings in an old fence row, both broken and pointing to the southeast. Later, after the neighbor had cut off the tops of the saplings that were in his way, near his garden, my oldest son and I tried to straighten one of them back up, and even broken over at a weak point where it grew up through the woven wire fence. We couldn't budge it. My son is 6'2" and has been heavily involved in CrossFit for many years. This is also west of the same barn where, early in the 1950s, my mom told me that she and Dad heard something scream out west of the barn, and he took a shotgun with him when he went to look for it, but found nothing. Also, this is the second time in 5 years that saplings side by side have been broken over at the edge of our yard. The first time the breaks were well above my head. This time I think one broke as intended at about 5 feet, and the second broke at a weak spot. One can have no concrete evidence when mind speak occurs, and it leaves you wondering about yourself. In this instance, I hang my hat on the level of surprise I felt at hearing my own voice silently say completely unexpected words. Also, I grew up on this farm and, as a little kid, explored it all over. My children are the 7th generation to be here. Sabe has always been here. We have always been neighbors, but I just didn't know it until finding your channel. I wonder how much stuff I've missed. We'd been away from the farm for 15 years. No family members were on the place then, and we returned about 10 years ago. The activity is almost playful. I recite aloud a series of memorized short prayers for the departed, removing difficulties, healing, unity, etc. It only takes a few minutes. As I hike the trail alone with my small dog nearly every day, and I tell my neighbors in the wood line that they are okay with me. They seem good with that. I fear this is getting too long, so I'll just stop here. Thanks again for the channel. Keep on keeping on, your friend, Grant House. Grant, thanks for that, man. Appreciate it. And I wasn't trying to be insulting when I was surprised that you mowed your hiking trail. Because a hiking trail to me is up the mountains in the middle of frickin' nowhere, right? I can't picture mowing it, but anyway. That's an interesting thing. You know, I got a friend of mine who doesn't have any time for this topic at all. It's like, no time at all, although his son has seen one of these things with his eyeballs and it freaked him right out really badly. And he still doesn't have time for this topic, and he doesn't even look at his son and take those words seriously. But anyway, he did mention to me that every time he went for a hike, this is near Whistler, British Columbia, down to a certain location where a river actually goes underneath the Sea to Sky Highway, that he felt like he was being watched and really uncomfortable, even the dog. And he always noted that one spot, all times of the year. So, those one spots, right? Those one parcels of land, those one chunks of timber. What's going on in there? What's going on? I have a funny feeling it isn't going on because something just happens to be there at that same time. I have a funny feeling that maybe possibly geographically those spots have something to do with something we don't understand and have too much knowledge about. That's what I think. Everybody's gonna think differently, right? Another splush of go juice. Man, I didn't sleep worth a shit last night. Still feeling kind of groggy. But I'll wake up shortly. But anyway, thanks again for sending that in, man. Really appreciate that. And if you learn anything significant, if you gain any knowledge that may help somebody, whether it's good or alarming, make sure you get it out and share it with as many people as you can, all right? Don't be scared of people, I'm sure you aren't. This next one is titled Dead Deer That Got Away. Hi Steve, I'm sending this to both of your emails, so hopefully you get it. And that's probably how I get them twice, right? Excuse me. You can use my name because I don't give a shit what others may think. My name is Mark Johnson. I grew up in Duluth, Minnesota. In the mid-1970s, my family started building a cabin on a small private lake named Linwood Lake around 40 miles north of Duluth. It is situated just east of White-Faced Reservoir. At that time, our property was the last in line on the west side of the lake. There was nothing but thick woods behind and to the north of us. There was a trail you could walk at the cabin next to ours to get to Whiteface. It was about a half of a mile walk. To get to our cabin, you had to take a series of logging roads for quite a few miles. Then a locked gate, and another mile or so you would reach the boat landing. We had to haul everything by boat to get to our property. It was a couple of years of hard work by the time we had the land cleared and the shell of the cabin up. We also had a bunkhouse and an outhouse, a storage shed. There was no electricity or running water. We had a generator for tools and gas lights and a wood stove. During this time, two of my dad's friends were also building cabins on the lake. One was 2 cabins south of ours and the other was about 8 cabins south. I'll call my dad's friends Ron and Buck because I don't have their permission. Before we had our cabin built, we would use the other 2 cabins to stay at. The furthest one away, Ron's cabin, started out as an old 4-person camper in the 1950s, set on blocks to keep it off the ground. My first strange encounter happened there. I was around 8 to 9 years old. I was finishing eating my lunch while the group must have meant the majority of the group were at the dock packing up the boat to go home. The door of the camper faced the lake. The small table was in front of the camper and a small window was on my right. While I was eating, I noticed that the window just went black, like someone or something was standing there. I completely froze and could not turn to look at the window. The camper door was open and the screen door shut. The dock was about 200 feet away. I felt like I could not move. I finally got the courage up and ran as fast as I could. That's what's got my attention down there. I felt like I could not move. I finally got the courage up and ran as fast as I could out of the camper and down to the dock. I remember asking if anyone was at the camper and they said no. Ever since that time, I always felt like I was being watched and a little creeped out whenever we went to the cabin. My sex experience happened at our cabin in the winter. I was around 11 years old. It was in the winter and later in the evening, and it was bright moonlit night. Usually it was so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. It was close to bedtime and I needed to pee. Normally we would just go off the side of the deck, but being so bright out, I didn't want anyone to see me going. A kid thing, I guess. Anyway, I went down to the shoreline and there was a large old birch tree just to the north side of the dock. That was not dead enough to cut down yet. I went in front of it and faced the cabin and did my business. As I was finishing up, I happened to look down the shoreline to my right where there were no other cabins, and I noticed what looked like a large tree stump. Around 100 yards away, it was about 6 feet tall and about 4 feet in diameter, and maybe 20 feet out from the tree line. And maybe about 20 feet out from the tree line. All right, sit down. Where I know there was never a tree there because it was all shallow water and reeds in that area. It was black in color against the white snow. I was scared shitless, and I ran as fast as I could back to the cabin. I don't remember if I told anyone about what I saw. I never went outside on my own at night ever again. My third encounter was when I was around 16 years old. It was rifle deer season, early November. We had 3 deer stands a ways north of our cabin between Linwood and Whiteface, about a 20-minute walk. I was in one that faced more towards our cabin. It was around 4 in the evening, and the sun was getting ready to set, and I was cold and getting ready to head back to the cabin. I happened to notice what appeared to be a large rock through the brush maybe 25 yards away. I had a rifle with a scope on it, which was almost useless due to the thick brush in the area. I pulled out my rifle and looked at the scope and saw the upper chest, neck, and head of a deer. My adrenaline started to flow and I started to shake a little because I had never shot a deer before. I had taken the safety off, I was getting ready to shoot, and I looked at its head and noticed it didn't have any antlers. We did not have a permit to shoot a doe, so I slowly put my safety back on and lowered my rifle and decided to watch her through the brush. I watched her for a few minutes when all of a sudden a very loud tree break from behind me scared her. She was facing Linwood Lake, and when the noise happened, she did a 180-degree leap and headed towards Whiteface along with a large buck that I'd never seen beforehand. I saw 2 white tails leaping through the brush and gone. I raised my rifle and looked at the scope. I could not find a trace of them. I looked to my right to where the noise came from, and I saw nothing. I decided to get going back to the cabin before it got too late. The whole time I hunted in that area, I always felt uncomfortable, like a creepy feeling all over your body. I had one more story about that area. I was not involved, but my uncle and cousin were there. I was not involved, my uncle and cousin were there when it happened. It was bow hunting season for deer around 79. Only the shell of our cabin was up, and my uncle and cousin were there to duck hunt. My dad's friend Buck was bow hunting and shot a small buck from a stand, which was in the same general area that we all hunted in. He watched that buck lay down under a pine tree after he shot it. It was getting a little dark, so he decided to get some help with it. He went back and got Ron and my uncle and cousin. The 4 of them grabbed some Coleman gas lanterns and set off to get the deer. When they reached the area, the deer was gone. Buck ties a line to the arrow so he can locate it after. So they followed the line and found the arrow and some blood. They followed the small blood trail for a bit when my uncle noticed something white laying on the ground. He picked it up and asked Buck, "Did you shoot it in the ass?" Buck replied, "I shot it through the lungs." And my uncle showed him the white tail attached to a chunk of hide that had been ripped off of the deer. They followed the blood trail until it disappeared. They started looking around to pick up the trail again and noticed there was blood smeared on some trees about 6 feet in the air. Wow. The trail continued on for a bit further until they came up on a small clearing with trees laid out in a triangle and leaves placed in the middle of the trees. They found the deer in these leaves, and when looking closer at it, my uncle saw the deer was ripped open, gutted, and the cavity stuffed with leaves. The throat had also been ripped out and leaves stuffed in it. All the internals from the deer were nowhere to be found. They were deciding what to do with the deer when my uncle said, "Whatever did this to the deer is probably watching us right now." My cousin freaked out and hugged my uncle's leg for dear life. They left the deer and went back to their cabins. And as soon as my uncle and cousin got to the cabin, my uncle nailed all the windows shut. I've never known my uncle to get that scared. The story is better told by my uncle. I hope to get him on tape telling it before it's too late. I've not gone hunting or been in that area since the mid-1980s. It sucks. Oh, I guess it doesn't mean you quit altogether, does it? Just that area? My father died in 2001 and gave the cabin to his girlfriend, who sold it immediately. Sucks. I've wanted to investigate that area with people that know what they're doing, but being it is a private gated lake makes it difficult. I want to finish up that I've believed in these creatures as long as I can remember. I know of more stories from that area. One from a man named Frank Hansen. The story is called I Killed the Ape-Man Creature of Whiteface. It takes place not too far from where we used to deer hunt. It is also about the Minnesota Iceman story. Another strange thing is that I was born on October 20th, 67. If you know what happened on that day, the Patterson Gimlin film, I only discovered that a few years ago. Sorry for the long email. I needed to get my stories out. Take care and never give up, Mark Johnson. Well, I guess somebody had to have been born on that day. But anyway, that's that story. I'm guessing the Frank Hansen story must be a popular one. You probably Googled it up, I'm guessing. I'm not familiar with it. I'm familiar with the Minnesota Iceman. Instantly I saw the photo, the image of the photo of that thing laying there frozen. I think it was an arm across its chest or something. Anyway, that's a bunch of frickin' interesting experiences you've had. Long-time member of the Club of No Return, right? Somebody wants to, if the Frank Hansen story is helpful and somebody's familiar with it, you might as well email it in and we'll get it shared. I'm guessing. Wow, that's a different one. I've never heard of. I think one time I read a story from Alaska where some guy shot a black bear and they're trailing it. And I think they had either found the bear and had gone to go get a quad or gone to get help or whatever and came back and it was gone. And the guy just looked down and by absolute fluke, he saw about a nickel-sized patch of black in the moss. And the bear was perfectly buried and covered in moss. Perfectly. Except for that one little nickel spot. And something had done that while they were gone, which is really creepy. What can I kind of relate to? I'll show you one story I'll show you a story when I was about 17 years old. Young and dumb and doing stupid shit nonstop. And it was, I think, what was I doing? I was hunting somewhere. And I was with another kid. And I'd shot a deer. I shot this buck, came across a buck. And we shot this deer, dropped it. Made a shot, wasn't the best shot on the planet. The deer made a little bit of noise. And then we were going to leave it there and then go get the truck and see if we could drive the truck as close as we could to where the deer was. Anyways, either way, I gutted the deer out. I think the lungs and heart were still in the chest. And I put that thing, I wedged it between a huge fallen fir log that was about this, the fir log is probably 3.5, 4 feet off the ground thick, against a moss rock, and I wedged it in there and I took a great big chunk of that thick, mature fir bark, like almost like a shield sized pieces that blew off this blowdown, and stacked those on top of the deer on the high side wedge of that tree. And we left and went and got the truck, drove back up as close as we could, and then we went in to go get the deer. And when we went to get the deer, and this is in timber, the deer was taking, the bark was completely off of the deer, and the deer was on the ground over there, about 10 yards, on the low side. So whatever moved the deer took it up and out of that wedged hole, and this is like a 150-pound animal, took it up over top of the log, dragged it 10 yards, and the entire inside chest and the insides were completely licked clean. And it's just laying there. No teeth marks, no nothing. But when you mentioned your uncle said, I think you said your uncle said, whatever did this is watching us right now, those are the exact same words I said to the guy that's with me, the kid that's with me. Whatever did this is right here with us right now. I'm pretty sure it was a cat. I'm guessing it was a big cat. But it sure moved that thing a far ways. And it didn't get to the point of scratching dirt and sticks over top of it yet, like they normally do when they come across a kill, right? But anyway, the leaves stuffed in the carcass, that's a new one. I haven't heard that yet, and I would have taken note of that too. I would remember reading those details. That's a new one. That's a new creepy one. That would creep anybody out. Leaves jammed in it, laying on a bed of leaves in a triangle of trees. That's a full-on what the F story, right? What the hell? But anyway, thanks again for sending that in, man. That was a pile of information, a pile of experiences. Holy cow. A pile of them. And again, same old, same old. You come across anything that can help the people, get it out and share it. And always speak openly about what you've experienced. Always. Don't be scared of anybody or anything ever. Crazy. All right, let me get another one down here. Where was I? Illinois and southeastern PA. Hello Steve, I'm 27 years old. I've been hunting, fishing, and roaming the woods and hills of northern Maryland and southeastern PA since I was just a boy. In November 2020, for the third year in a row, I traveled to Illinois. I proudly drove my 86 F-150 to the Midwest. It took me about 14 hours, LOL. Good old 300 inline six motor. I wanted to spend 7 or 8 days bow hunting public land with a very good friend of mine who resides in the state. In 2019, I actually was able to harvest a 160, 70-inch whitetail on public land. Never had officially scored, but I don't really care much about that. That's great, man. That must have been a hoot. He was a true free-range public land beast, mainframe 12-point with some kickers on his brow tines. Put this mature deer at 16 scoreable points. What a great memory. We hunted this deer for 4 or 5 days straight, and the day before I had to drive back home, I got my opportunity. With my 91 Matthews compound bow, I bought off a Craigslist for $100. LOL. Couldn't have done it without the help of my good friend. He's an excellent hunter and outdoorsman. It was a team effort. I'll leave his name out of this, even though I'm sure he wouldn't care, because he is the one that introduced me to your page, and I listen every single morning religiously. Okay, so the first week of November 2020, somewhere in the river bottoms of the Sangamon River, Illinois, public hunting ground. There's 4 of us. We all set out in different directions. We're kind of just winging it, if you will, scouting some new ground, but planned to hunt until dark. I hiked maybe close to a mile from the truck. It was very warm for November. Once I found a nice little spot, I can't lie, I kind of dozed off in the sunlight, sitting against the base of a big tree with the deadfall in front of me to act as a natural blind. An hour or so had passed, so I had moved to a new location about 60 yards away. After about 20 or 30 minutes in this new location, out of nowhere, I suddenly felt extremely scared and felt fear/dread. It felt as if everything around me was spinning. I completely lost my bearings and I felt an extreme urge to leave. For the life of me, I couldn't remember which way to go back towards the truck. I started sweating and was very worried. Now I know if my buddy hears this email, he will know who was writing it, and I'm sure he will say I was lost and that I couldn't find my way out of a 55-gallon barrel if I had to. Now mind you, there are 4 of us, still 2 hours of daylight left. My friend and I both walked a few hundred yards down a field edge. I cut in the timber and basically just beelined it straight in another 200 to 300 yards. What I'm trying to say is I wasn't zigzagging my way around in unfamiliar terrain. This particular area, yes, could be very easy to get lost. But that was not the case. The fear and dread I felt was like nothing I've ever experienced. Like you always say, Steve, go with your gut. And let me tell you, boy, did I. I couldn't get out of those woods fast enough. Something was telling me to leave. I remember just feeling very anxious and very uncomfortable. I was walking at a fast pace back and forth, looking all around me, every direction, not knowing where to go. I did my best to calm down and focus. Once I finally got 150, 200 yards out of that general area, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. I got my bearings back and felt pretty silly because I was already heading the right direction the whole time all that was going on. But the sudden urge to leave and fear I felt was like nothing I've ever experienced. Also, you have shared other experiences from the general area I was in that day. I've done some research myself about the Sangamon River area, and there are surprisingly a lot of encounters and stories. I never saw or heard anything out of the ordinary. The only thing I can remember that sticks out was it suddenly got very gloomy around me. The air felt heavy almost. Also, everyone had cell phone service except me. They were texting each other their locations and whatnot, talking back and forth. We were all generally in the same area. a mile, maybe a little more apart. It's all just marshy, wet, flat river bottom. I finally got out of there and felt very relieved to see the gravel road and our trucks parked alongside it. Also, before I end this share, I'd like to add something else for all the listeners. When you say to just ask someone, look them straight in the eye with a good demeanor about this topic, it's true, and it helps to bring up a subject like this. I did exactly that with a grown man about 45 years old. I don't know him extremely well, but we've known each other for 2 to 3 years, and I'll occasionally see him since he lives in the same area as me. So, one day, I brought up this topic to him in a very serious manner. And next, he shared with me 1 to 2 experiences from where he grew up near a place called Muddy Creek in southern New York County, Pennsylvania. A beautiful creek with class 4 to 5 rapids. It's in a deep valley. The creek feeds into the Susquehanna River. The hills, Susquehanna River. The hills are very steep and there are tons of big ancient hemlock trees, lots of oak. It's just a beautiful place. My friend told me he's seen 16 to 18 inch tracks with 3 toes in the snow clear as day on more than one occasion. Yeah, the 3-toed thing is bizarre to me. That makes me go weird. That's just a strange one because I've never seen it and I can't imagine what would be attached to it myself yet. He also said he's had other strange things that happened while in those Muddy Creek hills growing up as a boy. After he talked about this topic, he kind of chuckled and said he hasn't told anyone or has anyone asked him about this subject in 15 or so years, due to people laughing and ridicule, he stated. There are also 2 other people I know that have had an encounter with these beings. One is a friend of mine's father that I've known since I was about 10 years old. He had a visual encounter while canoeing down this very creek in the 1970s. He said he came around a corner on a summer morning and there were 2 of them, knelt down by the water's edge. It didn't last long, he says, and once they saw him, they took off up the steep hill. The other person is my grandfather, whom I would trust with my life and believe anything he says. He was a true outdoorsman, hunted and trapped his whole life, even retired in his 40s and ran a trap line catching red fox, coyote, beaver, and muskrat. His story was, he was also in a canoe, but he was out on the river fishing close to an old canal. There was a sheer rock cliff, probably 80 to 100 feet high, and my granddad said something was rolling huge rocks / boulders off of the top. At this time, he's just a boy, and he didn't stick around to investigate or see anything. Just a few miles downriver from us is the Conowingo Dam. Conowingo Dam? It's the last dam on the river bottom before it runs out into the Chesapeake Bay. And ironically, like you always mention, there's a nuclear power plant just a short boat ride downriver from Muddy Creek. Steve, a while back, he shared a man's email. The title was, Native Man Shares Experiences Near Where I Have Had an Experience. And when I heard the location and the story, I couldn't believe my ears. It was right here in my backyard at Muddy Creek in '74. From what I recall, it was a pretty frightening / visual encounter the gentleman had. He did not leave his name, but he did say he went to North Hartford High School, and that even some of his family members laughed at him or just flat out didn't believe him and said he was nuts. I left a comment on that video and would love to get in touch with that gentleman. I frequent the area of Muddy Creek all year round, fishing, hunting, and kayaking the creek. I know you're big on listening to what the natives have to say, Steve, and I thought you'd like to know the Native Americans from this area are known as the Susquehannocks. I'm going to end this here. Thank you, Steve, for what you do and taking the time to share what everyone has to say. Amen. Thank you for sharing, right? Thank you for the time you just took to send that in. And I think that's great that you look people squared up, look them straight in the eye, don't smirk, don't laugh, don't smile, and ask them honestly if they know of anything that's going on that's alarming or strange or unknown in the forest. That's how you get people to share. It works, obviously. Another person just did it, it worked. Anyway, the nuclear power plant, you know what would be, after what we've heard from Edgar and his colleagues, You know what might be interesting would be to go near that power plant where you can and see if you can circle it at the farthest distance you can from it, but where you can still clearly see to the security perimeter. I wonder if you would find some wore out spots where some potential beings have sat and spent a lot of time observing from that distance, maybe. I don't know. Because remember when they said, when those scientists said that when they were studying them, they said that these things were 1,400 meters from them, and they used one candle power, and remember, he raised his hand and that thing looked straight at him from 1,400 at 2 in the morning. And they said, quote, that was where they always were observing from. So, me being the hunter that I am, taking note of the actions of the beings in question, trying to figure out what they do, where they frequent, where they hang out. I think if I lived near a nuclear place right now and I was curious enough, I would circle the perimeter of that place where I legally could without getting in too much trouble, and I would see what and where the small little vantage points were where I could just get a peephole through to the security perimeter, and then start going from there until I found, oh, something's been hanging out here quite a bit, look at this, right? If you're inclined, if you're curious enough to do that. Actually, now that I think about it, I probably wouldn't do that, because I already, I know where these things are, these beings frequent, and I'd rather just have them just hang out on their own, do what they want to do, and leave me out of it. So, but there's a lot of people out there that would rather look. I gotta read one more, and I gotta get going. I gotta leave shortly here. My experience with these damn things is the title of this email. Good day, Steve. Thanks for giving me and the hundreds of others who write to you the chance to be heard, not ridiculed. I appreciate your no BS approach to this topic, and for calling out the keyboard commandos who are not outdoorsmen, hunters, or real scientists. I envy your lifestyle and respect the decisions you made as a young man to focus on your passion. All right, thank you for the kind words. After college, I joined the military, as has the past 5 generations of men in my family. I served in Central American conflicts as well as in operations in El Salvador, Panama, Honduras, Lebanon, Grenada, Kuwait, and Iraq, attaining the rank of captain. After this career, I moved to the private sector where I worked in technology for a company in Seattle. Holy shit, the stories you must have. I hunted the backcountry of Oregon and Washington since I was 14. I've taken my share of wapiti, Roosevelt, and Rocky Mountain, as well as bear and deer. In 2012, I purchased a Washington property on the Canadian border. My closest neighbors are at the border, crossing about 12 miles away. It's not a guide's life, far from it. The home is a modest log cabin I built. In 2018, November, I hiked up a creek bed on Independent Mountain hunting mule deer. I was in about 2 hours walk before daybreak to a hip on the east side of the mountain, and was set with a clear view down the trail and to the creek bed. The sound of the water cascading down the rocks of the creek hid my noise as I had approached. The sun was still minutes from first light when I saw a blacktail come from the western hip down toward the creek bed. He was 140 yards off and coming toward me. In the scope, I could see he was a buck. He was now hidden by the trees and a rocky knob on the hillside. I picked out a spot in the creek where I thought he would emerge and shouldered my rifle. Just to the left of where I was focused was a dark shape. I had not noticed it in the dark ascent. To this spot. It was about 20 feet from the water's edge and maybe 30 yards off. Sighting in on the shape, it suddenly stood up. Hairy, dark creature, easily 9 feet tall, turned and looked right at me. Through the scope, I could sort of make out a hairless face in the dim morning light, almost human. It was as though he, or it, was staring right through the scope at me, and I was scared shitless. Very long arms with biceps bigger than my waist. Holy crap. Picture that, you guys. Very long arms with biceps bigger than my waist. Still staring at me, it raised his left hand above his shoulder. I slowly lowered the rifle to the ground and raised my left arm. We held that posture for maybe 5 seconds when the creature lowers his arm. The creature turned and in 2 steps crossed the creek bed, ascended a near vertical 8-foot bank, disappearing into the forest within seconds. 2 nights later, back at the cabin around 10:30, my dogs, German Shepherds, alerted that something's outside. They growled at first, then came a grunt and a shriek from the woods, so deep and ominous, the dogs ran and hid. I heard a commotion coming from the back of the property. I ran to the door, grabbed the shotgun as I went. There was nothing, no sign of any animal or person. After a few minutes, the dogs calmed down and we spent a sleepless night listening and watching with all the lights out. Nothing more happened that night. The next morning I found that the steel walk door of my shop had been ripped off its hinges and tossed about 60 feet into the trees with an impact that left a huge scar on a Douglas fir it hit. Holy crap. ×2. In the following days, I found tracks near the cabin, nothing more. I prayed these creatures would never return. They did not that year, but last November I began hearing them in the woods, banging logs into trees, howls and odd chatter that was similar to what I heard in one of your videos. Contemplating selling the place and giving up. I've told no one of this. I'm not leaving this. I'm not leaving. This is the place and lifestyle I worked my entire life for. Use my name, I don't give a shit. And aside from those damn things, I do not fear anyone, and no one really gives a shit if I'm alive or dead. Zelig Cohen. There you go, just another story. I hope I didn't butcher your name, man. And that's a holy shit. That's a holy shit story. I think, as you know, if they wanted you dead, you'd be dead. You wouldn't even have been able to type this out. It's unfortunate, man. It's unfortunate that those feelings, that's the feelings that we get. I'm out of here. I'm selling everything. I'm out of here. I don't want to be here. I'm terrified. But meanwhile, nothing's really happened to you, right? They've made a display that they can easily smash the living shit out of you, your entire existence, with ripping that steel door off. And the raising the arm thing, that's been reported more than a few times. And more significantly too, is when you said that it felt like that thing looked straight into your eye through that scope. We've had numerous people, numerous hunters have shared that exact same sentence. Notably, a fella who's near here, and he has hunted near where I was previously living. I know exactly roughly where he was. And he said that thing, he felt like he was something was looking at him in a high alpine basin in the BC coastal mountains. And that thing got up 300 yards away from him, I think, and was motoring down the shale in the basin, looking right at him. And he said, quote, it was like it was looking right into my eyeball through my rifle scope. And he was sitting there all nuzzled in the rocks. He also said that it had a real worn, lonely, sad, almost like I'm done look to its face, like it had already been through a lifetime of absolute misery and hell. And he said it looked tired and not happy. But I don't know what to say. I mean, obviously I've already shared with everybody that I've left a handful of places alone. I just don't go there previously. And is it the right thing to do? I don't know. That's what my gut made me do. Although I always encourage people not to give up, don't run, don't be scared of anything. But you always follow your gut too, right? So I hope you don't have to sell your place, and maybe possibly these beings will leave. It's definitely unnerving, isn't it? I mean, you guys see where I get out there a lot. I go to places remote by myself all the time. I don't have a fright of the forest. I'm not scared alone. I avoid the real intense places because I just don't need to have one of these things breathing down my neck with absolute rage, escorting me the 2.5 to 3 hours to get out of the timber where I normally go. I'm just not into it, right? So I avoid those heavy, heavy spots that I've been to previously and had things happen. But I'm not going to give up entirely. If I have to give up my passion for the outdoors, I'm just going to go jump, right? I mean, what else am I going to do? Go golfing? Start shopping? You know? But anyway, possibly try speaking out loud to them, right? Tell them how you feel. Tell them to leave you alone. You know they're here. It's like I always say, I know you know I'm here. You know I know you are here. Let's just leave each other alone. So far, it has been working to a point, right? I mean, obviously shit gets thrown at me the odd time. We've heard sounds. I have a funny feeling they're sitting there listening to me doing this and they're getting a kick out of it, possibly, right? Trying to pick. They're probably sitting there listening to the stories and seeing who they know are being mentioned in the story. You never know, right? You never know. But anyway, make sure you email back again and keep me posted. Keep us posted on what's happening around that property. Keep us posted on what happens, what's going to happen, what's possibly coming, and whether or not it gets better or worse or more comfortable or at ease or not. And let us know. Anyway, I got to go. I got to hook on my trailer. I got to take the little girl to the ferries, and I got to pick up a few hundred fence posts and make my way back. And I lost a day yesterday. I didn't get what I needed to get done yesterday because Sarah's Tahoe was grinding in the front end, and I ended up having to dive underneath that thing for the whole half afternoon. Brakes and rotors and calipers, the whole 9 yards. 4 trips back and forth from the auto parts store. And didn't even get to touch the poultry barn, didn't get the phone calls made I wanted to get done. Just completely took a day away from me. So off I go. Share my story at howtohunt.com. Get it off your chest, get it out, and get information that'll help the people to me so I can get it to the people. All right? I'll be back.